Okay, hello everyone. My name is Michael Downey, Library and Information Services Coordinator at the AWRI, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar and also to welcome today's presenter, James McIntyre. A chemist by trade, James has worked in a variety of industries, including the wine sector and agriculture sector more generally. Currently an associate with 2XE and bringing a wealth of knowledge around sustainable, efficient and productive business practices. It's great to have James here to tell us what role lean production can have in the winery. But before I hand over to James to tell us more about today's topic, just a couple of quick notes on what you, the audience, can expect from today's webinar. As usual, the format is a short PowerPoint style presentation followed by a Q&A. The session is being recorded and will be available to view later on the AWRI website. And finally, for those that are new to webinars, it's important to remember that webinars are interactive and there are a number of ways that you can get involved. To ask a question, please type into the question section of your control panel in the bottom right corner of your screen. And for those with access to a microphone, there's also the option of speaking directly with our presenter by clicking the raised hand button, which is located in the top left section of your control panel. If you prefer to ask a question via email, please do so at infoservices@awri.com.au. Feel free to send through questions at any time, and once we get to the Q&A, I'll get as many questions through to James as possible. And just finally, for those that like to get involved through Twitter, please use the Twitter handle @_AWRI. Okay, that's enough from me for now. I'm now going to hand over to James to get us started.
Good morning all. First off, I'd just like to say thank you for everyone who has come this morning, and it's great to see a lot of familiar names and companies in the list here. So thanks again for all of that. Thank you to Michael, and thank you to AWRI for letting me speak today as well. So I guess the first thing I really want to do is just give you a bit of an overview about what we're going to talk about this morning. So what I want to talk about is lean production in the wine industry. Now, to give you a bit of background, so I work for 2XE, which we specialise in business productivity systems. Now, we were engaged by Wine Australia last year to build the lean guide for wineries. And this is just a method of taking the concepts of lean manufacturing, getting rid of a lot of the jargon and just keeping it nice and simple and specific for wineries. So we did that, and that was a production of the lean guide. And then after that, we undertook 2 pilot trials. And the pilot trials were, first off, the first one was trying to identify potential savings from implementing lean practices, and the second one was more an implementation of lean practices and what the benefits were going to be. So we did that, and we've got a lot of the results that I want to sort of run through that with you today, and just to give you a bit more of an overview. Now, since those 2 pilot trials, we've actually started undertaking, Wine Australia's been undertaking a lot of lean workshops, and this we've been rolling out across Australia, and we've actually got a few more that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. So we've actually got one in Renmark this Thursday, one in Mildura on the 18th of November, and one in McLaren on the 26th of November. Now, what I'm going to go through is really just a quick overview about lean manufacturing, because it really is, it's a fairly broad topic, and I'm not going to be able to get all the concepts across, but if you register for one of the workshops, then I'll give you details about how to do that a little bit later in the presentation, and we can go from there. So, first thing I want to do is, let me just make sure this is all, there we go. Yeah, so the first thing we really want to look at is what is lean production? Look, in essence, lean production, it's just a way of increasing efficiency, decreasing operating costs, and making the job easier. And making the job easier is something that will come up time and time again, because what you find is that whenever you've got frustrations in the job, whenever you've got any issues, you end up finding that these are usually a waste. And by waste, we're talking about activities that, you know, consume resources, time and money, but they accomplish nothing. So that's really what lean is in a nutshell. It's really identifying these hidden non-essential activities and production steps and eliminating them. So as you keep on going, sort of the important part here is that lean decreases your operating costs by eliminating the cause of production costs. So it doesn't mean that a winery needs to slash costs to decrease costs. It eliminates waste to decrease costs, and this is really quite an important distinction. So as we said here, lean eliminates waste. Again, you can use fewer resources, improve your operating costs. All of a sudden you find that you're freeing up labour so that you can target additional opportunities. Now, the important thing to note is that this is not just relevant for your operational staff or for your barrel making, but we find this works really, really well with the winemaking team as well, just by chopping and changing processes, and whenever work's allocated onto the cellar hands, this is the same sort of thing. Works really well in laboratories and even in admin systems. So it's really quite a broad concept, and that's it in a nutshell. Is once you actually get the concept, it makes things a lot easier. Now, what I'll do is I just want to show you now. These were some of the savings that we identified. This was in the second pilot. So from the second pilot here, we've got the list up. I'm not going to go through all the details, but probably the biggest saving in the second pilot was wine recovery costs. So, and don't get me wrong, with these with the second group of wineries, we're working with some of the largest wineries in the southern hemisphere and some of the smallest wineries in South Australia as well. So it was the wine recovery cost savings. Even the smallest wineries sort of identified ways where they could and implemented practices where they could save $50,000 worth of wine loss, and towards the upper end it was $2 million worth of savings. And the last one that I want to talk about just quickly is labor efficiency. So again, it was just freeing up 200 hours for the smallest winery and about 4,000 hours for the largest winery. And that's a considerable amount of saving. Now again, this doesn't mean that we need to get rid of staff or anything like that, but rather you get to use them for additional projects to find ways to increase efficiency in other areas, or a lot of them just sort of went to pursuing lean at a much higher level. So these are the sort of things that we looked at through these initial pilot trials. But like I said, we've got so many more savings now since the workshop started about 3 months ago, and I guess it's just a matter of hopefully soon we can collate some of these additional savings and present that back to the group as well. Now, what I'm going to do is just describe one of the activities that we tend to do in the workshops, and this is probably the first step with lean manufacturing. This is really the identification of wastes. Now, there's 7 wastes that we talk about in regards to lean manufacturing, and they're listed there. Now, again, I won't go through this in a great amount of detail, but over-reduction, motion, weighting, inventory, over-processing, transport and corrections or defects. Now, in the workshops, what we tend to do is we sit around as a group and we identify these wastes in your own particular area. So if we've got admin staff, we sit there and have a look at their systems. We've got winery staff, we identify where each one of these wastes occur in their systems. And then we end up with coming up with projects to eliminate these. And this is probably one of the most successful areas of the workshops that we found to date. Now, originally when we ran it in part of the pilot program was in Accolade wineries, and we ended up with pages and pages of waste that were identified, and pages of projects to implement and eliminate these wastes. So that was a big step, and all these projects are actually on track. I think most of them are finished. So at the end of it, you just make the job easier and faster and quicker. So when we get down to it, what I'm going to do now very briefly is just talk about 5 of the more common wastes that we find that people can grasp fairly quickly, and they're also extremely common in the wine industry. Now, the first one we've got is motion. So motion in this case is the movement of people. This is walking around the winery. So, it could be cellar staff looking for equipment. It could be winemakers looking for cellar staff. It could be admin staff trying to find people or trying to find equipment. But we tend to find this a fairly common theme. The other one we look at is weighting. Now, weighting is, it's one of these areas where you don't sort of think about it as a waste, but it's more just an inconvenience. But when you start to add up the cost of changing processes or what you have to do when it means you have to wait for staff, it starts to add up quite a considerable number of hours, which of course translates to decreased work efficiency and really lost cost. So in waiting, we tend to find IT systems and slow computers and really complex and old wine databases really has a big impact on a waiting factor. And then you've got other things like waiting for growers to deliver, and again, waiting for decisions from decision makers. All of these have a big impact. The next one to talk about are defects. So, your classic example here is sort of wine loss, whether that's going to be in barrel or, poor juice extraction. This really is a defect when you consider it, and it consumes a lot of resources, in this case in the cost of wine, and doesn't necessarily produce any value. Fixing the same problem over and over again because you didn't get to the root cause of the problem the first time. That's another really common theme that we have going through. Overprocessing. Now, overprocessing is basically using more resources than what you need to get the job done. Now, I think one of the more common examples that we see there are refrigeration systems. I was fortunate enough, and it was great that the winery allowed me to share this, but it was a winery that was up towards the snow country, and their refrigeration system was they switched it off during winter because obviously they didn't need it, but the actual brine pumps were continually circulating even though the refrigeration system was off. We started calculating out how much electricity these pumps were going through, and it ended up being close to $10,000 where these pumps were running and actually producing no value whatsoever. So these are the sorts of things that we're talking about with overproduction. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is inventory. Now, it's probably a little bit rampant in the wine industry, but I'm not sure if you guys notice that wineries do tend to accumulate a lot of junk, so whether it's broken equipment or spare parts or, parts that are in, work that's in progress or anything like this, we just tend to find that wineries really do tend to accumulate, a lot of stuff that gets in the way of allowing you to do your job. So I want to talk a little bit more about that, and in particular, how we can actually go about fixing it. So right now I'm going to focus on one area. I'm going to focus on one tool and talk about 3 of the wastes. So the first one was motion, overproduction, and waiting. So again, this is a winery was kind enough to share their experiences with us and their winnings. So what I've got here is I've got a picture of 4 crates of parts that are either broken, no longer standard, no longer used, in excess of what people need. The problem is that all these parts were in circulation. So what it meant was we ended up, these are actually on boards, etc. So what it meant was, people actually set up for a pump just to realize that, this is the pump that has the broken couple, or this is the couple with the leak, or this is the one that doesn't actually fit on any of our equipment anymore. And so people would set up and then start the process, and wine starts spraying out everywhere, and go, not this one, let's try the next one. So this is getting back to rework. So we talked with the guys about it, and we thought, okay, look, let's just start from the beginning. Let's just do a scorch test. Anything that you don't need, get rid of it, because it's just creating hassle, and it's creating confusion and definitely frustration as well. So that was the first step. So the next step that we had was this here is the barrel hall for that same winery. Now, there's not a lot of barrels in this barrel hall, so what you can see at the moment are about 9 pallets that are on the ground. Now, each one of these has got again, junk. So, it's only about 1 box high, and some of the disused labels and labels that are no longer used, bottles that really shouldn't be, just singly stacked on a pallet, because there's a fair chance they're going to get damaged. So again, we looked at it and went, okay, what do you need and what don't you need? So this is a bit of a scorched earth policy. We went through and went, okay, these labels we're not going to use, and we thought we were, but the reality is we're not. It's sort of like Hoarders Anonymous. So we started getting rid of these labels, and then the boxes. Just to the left of this photo, and you can't quite see it, but over towards this way there was a rack. So any of the bottles that were still going to be kept, put it on a racking system. And what we ended up with is a lot of space. Now, from this space, this is a big complaint that there was never enough space in the barrel hall. Freed up all this space. Now, don't get me wrong, the barrels still need a little bit of TLC to get them organised and managed in a proper way. But this was just a simple, it probably took us about 5 hours in total to get this happening, and all of a sudden, things were so much clearer, things were straighter, things were easier to get to. So that was a big win. And I guess the reason you think about this is how important is this? Well, this is more than just cleaning up your bedroom. This is more a case of if you think about what motion, weighting, and inventory contribute towards. So, 30 to 80% of manual work is a waste of motion. It might be looking for equipment. It might be organizing equipment to you so you can get what you need. So if you can address the root cause of this, you can usually improve your manual operation times by at least 50%, for just a couple of hours worth of work. So what I want to go through the next one is we also had people that, looking for equipment, and this is a really common theme. I don't know if the rest of you feel free to chime in if this is a common issue for you, but yeah, we tend to find that looking for equipment is big, especially during vintage. Now, one of the reasons behind this, people are under the assumption that they don't have enough equipment. So they say there's not enough equipment. The reality is there's usually enough equipment, but people just can't find it. And that tends to lead to a downward spiral where people go, I need this set up for tomorrow, and I need this particular part, so I'll just grab this part and put it in the locker. And so then people don't have enough equipment because people are starting to hoarding equipment, and so people hoard equipment because they can't find equipment, and around and around and around it goes. So one of the things we did in this area was we gathered everyone together and we said, okay, look, let's talk about this, guys. Let's see if we can have a dedicated location for all your pieces of equipment, and we'll have it just a standard rule. The pump, for example, this is either going to be in use, but as soon as it's finished being used, it goes back to its dedicated area. And I don't think you can actually quite see it here, but there's actually a marked zone here where the pump goes. So again, this was it's not rocket science, but it is a way of really saving a lot of waste and waiting and motion and looking for equipment. So then we got our tape out, and we were doing this anyway, so I thought, oh, what the hell, let's start to mark out some particular areas. Now this was from the this is in the actual cellar door area. So again, the same sort of thing is it had the hand truck. It seems quite simple, but the hand truck, and it was either trying to find the hand truck so they could cart goods in and out. It seems like it shouldn't take that much time, but really when you start adding it up over a year, it ends up to be a lot of time. So again, same sort of rule, we just sat there and went, okay, if we're going to have the hand truck, it's either in use or it's back in this area. Same with the bin. It's not rocket science by any means, but it's just a way to make the system run a little bit smoother. Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is labeling. So this one was really, really cool. Now, in here we have four white bins full of white crystalline powder. Now, in each one of them, one's got tartaric, one's got citric, one's got DAP, one's got, I can't remember what that one was, but it's not too complicated. But one of the issues that the guys had was, occasionally people would take out citric and maybe DAP at the same time, and when they came back, they maybe put in the wrong area. And we did have labels on them, but they tended to fall off a fair amount. And so, and occasionally people would accidentally grab the wrong bin, which can cause a few issues further down the train. So what we did there was we just did a bit of labeling, and this was, again, this is a 10-minute job. So we just sat there and went, okay, let's have an agreement here, and everyone was, this came back from the staff. Okay, we'll just do some color coding, some basic color coding. So citric is now always going to be blue, and that means that any jugs or anything that we use for citric are all just color coded in blue with blue tape. The red one, so tartaric is always going to be red, DAP's always going to be black, and mystery crystals are going to be mystery crystals in yellow. But it's just this labeling which gives people good, clear directions, and so that they can understand where goods are and what they're connected to, which areas they're connected to. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but what it ends up doing is, especially if you've got new staff, it means that your training times all of a sudden go down significantly, because people can understand where things should be just by color coding. And this is a thing that we call visual management. And visual management is really just the whole concept that people get information a lot clearer using colors and rather than writing. So if you can use colors or icons or something like that, it just makes the system so much simpler, and it's harder for people to make mistakes. this is the same area. This is their yeast store. Now the big problem here is, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor or not, but up the top couple of boxes here, this is just before vintage. Did a quick stock check. Yep, we're all good for yeasts. But then when vintage crept along, we found out that these two boxes are actually empty, and that one was empty, and that one was also empty. So we had all these empty boxes that were lying here, and it meant things were really quite hard to figure out how much stock you've got, and if this was if we're going to get through vintage. So again, this one took probably about an hour and a half for one person, so it wasn't too much, but just a simple case of doing some basic supermarket storage here. So all the yeasts are unpacked. They all have their individual labels here. I probably should have taken a better angle, but if you look from here down, you can see exactly how much stock you've got at a glance. And this just saved a lot of time, and it meant that you didn't run out, you didn't overorder, all these minor things that you think are just inconveniences, but if you sort of run out, then it ends up to be more than an inconvenience. It starts to cost a fair amount of money. And again, did the same sort of thing with enzymes. So at a glance, you could walk in there and see how much enzyme you had, and if that was going to be enough to get you through the next couple of months. So the results that come from this, it's a 2 to 8% increase in labor efficiency alone. Again, it doesn't sound like much, but less work to get the same job done, and $26,000 worth of saving on 900 hours. I mean, that's really quite considerable. It means that the staff then are available to do other jobs, which is really quite important. So this is just one tool that we've used through the wineries. This is a nice, easy tool that people usually get fairly easily, and these are some of the results. Now, as I was saying, with the workshops, we've actually had so many more projects that have come up since then that people have thought of, which are really quite good. And hopefully I can share those later at the workshops if you come along, or if you go onto the Wine Australia website. So what I want to do is just recap. This is actually a tool. This is a lean manufacturing tool called 5S. It's just called 5S because everything starts with an S. But think about it in terms of a place for everything and everything in its place. And again, this is more than just tidying up your room. This is just a couple of short steps that if everyone maintains every day, you find the winery runs so much simpler. So sort, this is the scorched earth thing that we're talking about. So if you don't need it, get rid of it. If it's causing hassles, get rid of it, because the actual active inventory causes massive hassles for people. I just remember working with one particular winery and went into their warehouse, and I was a little bit scared to walk in their warehouse because they had crates piled up very, very high and didn't look particularly stable. And I remember talking with a warehouse manager. It wasn't really a warehouse manager, it was one of his other jobs, but it just sort of said, how long do you reckon it would take you to get to something that was the back of that row in the warehouse? And he said, oh, about 2. I said, what, about 2 hours? And he goes, no, about 2 days. I was like, okay, no problem. So this is an inventory issue. So wherever possible, throw things out. Now, straightening, making sure that things are in the right place. Make sure you got your tools where you actually need them. Sweep, and sweep's more than just about cleaning your area every day. It's really just about doing a walkthrough through the winery and making sure things are maintained in the area they're supposed to be done. Now, standardize, this is your labeling, this is your visual management, where you can create nice, clear visual signals very quickly. And the last one is sustain. Now, sustain is probably the most important topic here. Now, the reason that's important is because if this procedure is going to fall down, it's going to fall down on the sustain step. Pernod Ricard had a fantastic case study where they actually implemented 5S many years ago, and they got some great benefits out of it. After about 2 years, though, things sort of degraded and actually ended up exactly where they were before. Now, the reason behind that is because they didn't actually sustain it. Now, since then, they have really focused on rolling out 5S again, and really focusing on that sustain step, and it's been now successful for many, many years. But it's just one of those cases where people needed to be engaged and realizing that this really does make your job easier. And then once you've sold that to the staff, then people are a lot happier. So again, this came from the Pernod Ricard case study. The overview was, it's like having an extra person on team every day, and the other case was there were 2 other case studies, but the quotes that I like the best from is we just can't go back to the old way. And again, back down to the training is one of I can't remember if it was Joe, but from a winery, but she was saying that training new staff now takes a fraction of the time after putting these systems in place. So that's in essence just about 5S, and there's more details than that, but like I said, if you're interested, come to one of these workshops and we can roll that out a little bit more detail. Now, what I'm going to do is talk about another tool, but first I'll just focus on the problem. So this is over-processing and defects. So really what we want to do is try and identify some big process changes that are in the system. So this is a real example. We're using a technique called VSM, which is visual stream mapping. So it's really a way of mapping what your process is and looking for alternatives to try and improve the system. And there's a real example. So this particular winery, they used to take grapes on site, but they also used to take finished wine on site. And with that finished wine, sometimes they blend it, but a lot of times they just send it out for bottling and rebottle it under their own label. And we're talking about these processes and what we were doing, and the winemakers sort of came back and had a bit of a eureka moment and said, well, there's actually no reason why we need to bring this finished wine on site. We can send it direct to bottling, get them to filter it there. It's going to cost a little bit more to filter it, but transportation costs and how much it costs to have on site, how much is that going to cost? So we worked it out and we figured out how to actually do it as a group, and yeah, it was quite possible. We get the finished wine, transport it off of the previous winemaker. If needed, it could be blended at the bottling line, could be filtered, and then sent straight to bottling. Now we're sort of talking in a group and we try to figure out, how much is it actually going to save, and it ended up being, a saving of between 100 and 150K per annum every year just by changing this one step. So that was really just a bit of a eureka moment. You'll tend to find a lot of these situations as they come along. Similar sort of situation here is just changing processes, and I'll quite happily talk about AWRI and the work that they've done in this area. But there's been some fantastic work with trying to optimize fermentation efficiency. So one of the issues that people have had, and especially in the last vintage, were high baumes and slow ferments, and occasionally your stuck ferments. And so AWRI I've been working on is ways to match yeast to juice, matching yeast to juice chemistry, not just getting a juice chemistry and chucking in the same yeast and maybe making alterations to the juice where possible to try and get it to work or kick over. And what we found that after you're starting to match yeast to juice chemistry, you end up with a much faster ferment. And especially considering the bottleneck that fermentation is, this ends up increasing efficiency really quite significantly. And since then we've had a lot of other wineries that have started to look at co-inoculation at an earlier stage, and other wineries still have been actually getting juice in early so that they can get yeast to a propagation stage so that there's no lag when yeast are first added to ferments. And so these are all the sort of areas that you look at. You look at your process, in this case this is a bottleneck, and you basically just change a slow ferment to a fast ferment. Now I know it's a little bit more complicated than that, and I'm simplifying it, but these are the sorts of processes that really end up with some good wins. So as we were talking about before, with that first example, it was 100 and 150K worth of saving. Your fermentation bottleneck, you might think it's only 10K for a small winery, but if you actually look at the impact that has on the volume of wine you can process when you've got a long ferment versus a short ferment, it can tend to be tens of thousands of, potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars when you consider your labor and your increase in volume production that you can attain. So the thing to remember with this is none of these projects required any capital costs. Both of these were basically a zero cost project, but at the end of it was significant savings in efficiency and money. So this is really where the benefit of lean comes into. So just to recap on what value stream mapping is. I think I said visual stream mapping, it's value stream mapping. So these are big changes to process. So really, there's only a couple of steps. You want to map your current process, identify any of the wastes, find out where your bottlenecks are, and you create an artificial area, an ideal process with no wastes. And then as a group, we tend to get people to brainstorm and find ways to make it happen. Now, it's very rare that you actually reach your ideal process, but you can usually find ways to get towards that process and start to make it better. And this is where it's really quite special. Now, before I go on to the next slide, so these are two of the tools that we talk about a lot in the workshops. The other one that we talk about is culture change and continuous improvement. Now, culture change we've actually gone more and more and more into because we're finding that this is so important for almost every winery that we've worked with. And this is a case of getting everyone on board and making sure your leadership team is engaged and making sure all your staff are engaged and making sure everyone is focused on one area. Now I'm not going to go into that now, but I think the main purpose is just realize that in the workshop we go through this a lot, and when we usually get people talking about it, they share some really special experiences. So yeah, we can talk about that more in the workshop if you come along and register. So now all I want to talk about is this is probably post vintage reviews. So I know it's hard to get feedback doing a webinar, but I know a lot of people will probably have had a list of projects that they would have identified that they wanted to get done after last vintage. So, any improvements that they could have and anything that could make the job a little bit easier, and they probably would have had a list of these. And what we tend to find is that, you guys have only got months left before the next vintage kicks in. What we tend to find is that people have really only succeeded in completing about 20 to 30% of these projects. And this comes back down to continuous improvement and trying to find ways to do it. Now, what we try and do is one of the methods that we teach is once you've got engagement, we start to identify a couple of steps to increase continuous improvement and to end up with people making continuous changes to the process to increase efficiency. So there's basically three broad steps as we get people to examine the process, and it's really important that everyone in the winery is engaged on this. The next thing we do is just get people to identify improvement opportunities, and this can be just in their area. It's amazing how much just having a single improvement in your immediate area can have an impact on the rest of the winery. Other times we get everyone involved and a bit of a brainstorming session to look at the winery as a whole. It's a little bit harder, but it's nice when it happens. So once you've identified the improvement opportunities, then the important thing is implement the change, but you have to make sure that people are enabled to make this change. There's no use sort of saying, people have to have ownership and they have to be able to feel that they can make a change and they can have an impact on the way the winery runs. And of course, naturally, you need a bit of time so you can actually make this happen. And this can sometimes be a bit of a strain because people are time poor. However, once you start to increase these continuous improvement opportunities, we find that people all of a sudden have time, and that means that they can spend more time working on continuous improvement until you end up with one of the most efficient wineries that are out there, where people are happy. There's less frustration. People have a shared purpose. The culture is fantastic. All of these things sort of happen. Now, one of the things that we roll out, and this is when we get wineries to focus on continuous improvement, is using this we just call it a continuous improvement tracker. Now, there's only 3 elements that you need on a continuous improvement tracker to help get projects completed. So if I'm going from those 20 to 30% of projects completed to 90% or close to 100% of projects completed. So the main one is identify what's the actual issue and what needs to be done. That's one step. The other thing is having a due date and a responsible person. If you don't have that due date and you don't have that responsible person, then nobody has ownership and nobody's going to make it get done. That's not to say that a responsible person has to actually do the work, but they need to be responsible for completing it. But just by having that one section there ends up with a huge difference, and you end up moving from 20% of projects completed to 90% of projects completed. I was quite fortunate that one of the wineries that I was working with in McLaren Vale, we had a list of, I think they had more projects. I think they had about 40 projects, and we sort of gave them a month to try and, well, actually we're giving them about 3 months to try and get them done. And I called them after 2 weeks and I said, hey, how are you guys going with your projects? And I just got back saying, oh, I've done them. I was like, what do you mean you've done them? You've only had 2 weeks. I was like, no, we did them. All of them. It's like, yeah. And then we came up with another 100 projects. I'm like, can I see them? It's like, yeah, sure, come over. So I went and had a look, and this is a winery that had an incredible culture. It was really, really good culture, and I talked to the guys about it and said, well, you had 3 months to do this. Why'd you do it all now? And they basically said, look, we could see the real value in this. We could see how this is going to make our job easier. Why wouldn't we do it? So that's the sort of thing that we're trying to get out of increasing improvement and having a culture change within the winery. So again, I think more than anything, I'd just like to recap. Now, these were, again, the savings from not the workshop, but just from the second pilot trial. Now, since then, we've worked with a lot more wineries in these workshops that have been going on for the last 3 months, and hopefully we can start quantifying some more savings along the lines. So in the workshops, we really cover 4 topics. So it's thinking lean, identifying waste, implementing practices, and continuous improvement, and that really captures the idea of culture change as well, and how important having a good culture is in your area. Now, as I was saying before, this is really just a quick introduction session. If you are interested in learning more, register for a workshop. If you text that number, so 0428 038 984, if you text the word lean to that number, you'll actually get a link to Wine Australia, and Wine Australia will then send you to the sign-in page. Otherwise, if you just use that web address, research at wineaustralia.com, you can register for a workshop there. But there's 3 left this year. And then we'll be kickstarting again next year. But in all those details, we end up with a lot of group learning and a lot of time spent working through problems and sharing ideas and coming up with concepts. And the feedback from these sessions has been wonderful. So again, this is purely just an introduction, but if you would like, please come again to one of these workshops and register, and we can go from there. And that's pretty much it from me, Michael. I guess, is there any questions we've got at this stage?
No, we don't have any questions at this stage, James. Thank you for your presentation there, by the way. We will move into a Q&A from here, so yeah, just a reminder. If you do have a question for James, now's the chance to ask it. You can type into the bottom section of your control panel and send your questions through. If you've got a microphone, click the raise hand button and I'll unmute your mic and you can chat with James directly. There's also the option of emailing in a question, which you can do at infoservices@awri.com.au. We'll stick around for probably a minute or so and wait and see if we get any questions. Otherwise, we'll begin to wrap up. All right, we don't have any questions at this stage. I think James did just want to recap that final slide quickly and then we'll start to wind up.
So again, I just want to say thanks for everyone's time. Really appreciate it. And I know we've got a mix of people in different job titles here. I guess the main thing is that from the winemaking perspective, you can think of ways to help improve the value stream, further down the chain, so that your work can produce the same wonderful quality that you always do, and then just try and make the process easier and simpler for you. That would be fantastic. I saw Joe Swans here from McLaren Vintners. Laboratory systems, I cannot emphasize just how well lean works in laboratories. I was a lab manager for many years, and it really does make the job easier. And again, even when it comes down to group operations, this can be at a strategic level that you look at this, but it can also be in your immediate area. So yeah, again, if you are interested in finding out more, these Wine Australia are holding the workshops. So again, if you click on the link or text lean to that number. But thank you all very much for your time, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day.
Okay, thanks for your final thoughts there, James. And thank you very much for coming in to present. Also, thank you to everyone who's joined and participated in today's session. Attendees will receive a survey in an email. That email will also contain a link to a survey. Next week's webinar will be presented by Bruno Holzapfel from National Wine and Grape Industry Centre, and the topic is bunch stem necrosis, causes and management. If you haven't registered for this session and you would like to do so, please visit the AWRI website. Once again, thank you to everyone who's joined in today, and please do check out the AWRI's webinar program to register for future sessions.